Hello and welcome to another episode of Cosmic Echo, a Tale Eater podcast. In this podcast, we apply a scientific viewpoint on the strange and bizarre phenomenon that happens in our lives when we sleep in an altered states. In this episode, we speak with J.D. Arthur, who is the author of Salvia Divinorum, Doorways to Thought-Free Awareness, which previously went under the name People, Darkness, Perceptual Transformation through Salvia Divinorum. J.D. Arthur gives us a perspective of long-term use with Salvia Divinorum, as well as how he used it to overcome some fearful experiences, and also describes some of the entities and experiences that he had. If you'd like to learn more about J.D. Arthur and his book, you can visit the podcast website at taileeaters.com/CE podcast, and there you can click on the link that will take you directly to his book. You can also support our podcast at the same website through our Patreon page. Well, without further ado, let's get to the interview.
James, how you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
Doing all right. Let's see here. So you started off with using LSD, and then you moved to Salvia, but it seems that Salvia was far more spiritual in nature for you than LSD. Is that correct?
I wouldn't use the word spiritual. In fact, it would almost be the opposite. I think LSD is more spiritual in terms of emotions and thoughts. Now, we're also talking, it's like 30-something years ago when I did LSD. Haven't done it in a long time. But it was a very kind of emotionally rich experience, kind of thought and emotion would kind of embrace, kind of a mutual embrace of thought and emotion in terms of the world and that type of thing. So it was very rich in that sense, whereas Salvia is a lot more dark. For me, now this is all just personal. Salvia doesn't have the it kind of leaves its shoes by the door. It doesn't go in to like kind of ordinary feelings and for me, it's kind of removed from the ordinary world in terms of just experience. Really, it's not like LSD. With LSD, you're still in the world and you don't lose touch with the world. Whereas with Salvia, you do. For me, again. It's a totally different type of experience, and a lot more involving. You don't have a choice. It just kind of takes you where it's going to take you, and you have to relinquish everything. You have to relinquish that thought and emotion at the door when you go in. Again, this is my experience. I'm sure there are other people who don't feel the need to do that, or maybe that happens to them, and they're it can be frightening or whatever. But I think LSD has its place, but I wouldn't do it now. I don't think it would. I prefer Salvia now that I'm older too. I think maybe. When I was younger, it was different. You're more in the world and more, kind of figuring things out, that kind of stuff. Whereas now, it's just different. It's more, you understand, you come to an understanding. You can't figure things out with your mind. I think Salvia is good for educating one that way too, that your mind is really not the be all and end all of understanding. That thought is not, say with LSD, thought is kind of an ally or a tool, but with Salvia, it's you just have to leave it. It's like an arbitrary construct, it seems, that is a burden. So anyway, to compare the two, that's kind of the way I view it now. Anyway.
Okay. And so, I mean, do you feel that you kind of have to, I don't know, sort of eliminate perhaps thought and ego to kind of cross over to that other place?
Yes. I definitely thought, because you can't think with Salvia. I can't. There's a definite crossing. There's a definite gate to pass, and when you cross that gate, you can't bring thought with you. You just have to relinquish it. And if you do try, it's too burdensome. It's clumsy, and you just don't have the lightness or the fluidity that you would get when you relinquish it. I know that's also the kind of the frightening part too, because this is your whole world, that you're leaving. You're leaving at the door, and that's like a consistently terrifying thing. As you go in, and there comes that point where you know that it's going. You just have to let go, and but that's when things change, and it's a whole different mode of perceiving without thought. It's just a very direct, visceral experience. And I mean, there are emotions too, but it's not like that kind of it's so fast that you don't really have the chance to really dwell on anything. It's not like, say, with something like LSD or whatever.
So is that what you kind of mean by thoughtless awareness? Is that what you're describing?
Yeah. Because it's the kind of thing that, for me personally, it really snuck up on me. I wasn't expecting that, and then one time in particular, I realized that, it's kind of a shock that I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how old I was. And, it didn't really, it just like happened kind of rapidly. And I realized that I had no clue, where I was from. And I could have fought it and try to remember like a kind of desperate thing, but it didn't really seem that necessary, and I figured just to go with it. And but and then with successive states, it seems like that's the operative awareness with Salvia is to sort of have this just direct experience of your perceptions at the moment without thinking, because if you think, you have to really kind of define things in terms of memory and familiarity, and you just can't do it out there. It's just things are going too fast, and you don't have it's not necessary. It's the way it strikes me anyway.
So, how would you describe then functional awareness versus thoughtless awareness?
Well, I would say that the thoughtless awareness is the functional awareness for that state.
Oh, okay.
Because that's what you need. You can't have thought there. It's just so you need a different type of awareness to be in that state. And it seems like that's what where the thoughtlessness comes in. That's what you are kind of given as a vehicle for that state.
And it seemed to me, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Dale Pendle, but but he he used a term called dimensional smuggling. And and I thought about that a lot when I was reading your book, especially I thought it was really fascinating when you were talking about trying to bring back words. Can you talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, that was another thing that started kind of striking me, is that there's a difference in language. So yeah, a couple of times I tried to speak there and I just couldn't. It was just like you just couldn't speak because you're just used to ordinary language, and it seemed like it was the same type of language that you would have in dreams. I mentioned that in the book, where it's like a different type of language. It's not just the ordinary words with ordinary meanings. It's but anyway, with that particular experience, I was told something, that I had something there, and but since I couldn't really think, I didn't know what that word meant in this realm, and I guess I was close enough to the surface. I was kind of coming out of it, that I tried to remember what that word was, and there was a whole kind of sort of physical representation of trying to remember bringing this word back with me, and I had no clue what it was the whole time I was kind of holding on to it and resurfacing, and then when I finally my thought started to come back, it seemed that the word was the kind of the concept of name, that I had, in effect, had a name there, but it wasn't like, Bob or something. It was just, it was like some kind of a connection, almost like a sort of a signature or something like that. It's hard to describe. But that I had that connection with that realm through that name. And again, this is so like abstract, and it's hard to put into words. So it's kind of it's difficult to describe. But I think that the main thing that I notice with little episodes like this is that not only is your thought different, because your normal thought stops, more or less, but also because your thought stops, your language has to stop too. You can't just say, the chair or something, because your thought has stopped. So they kind of go hand in hand. It's like a different type of state, and I think it's almost dreamlike, because that's what happens when you're asleep too. Your thought stops to a large extent, depending on the depth. But your thought stops, and at the same time, you don't really think in words anymore. In normal words, you tend to think in like kind of little chunks of feeling or things like that, and there'll be words, but they're a lot more fluid over there. Just like people are fluid, you'll kind of combine different people somehow, or that kind of thing. And I think that Salvia has a lot to do with that type of state. It can bring you into not into a dream state, but into a state that is kind of beneath dreams, almost a state that gives rise to dreams. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's just my impression of it. I don't know any of these things. These are just my sense of it from my experiences.
I noticed that that you had a few quotes in there from Emanuel Swedenborg. Was he kind of a source of inspiration when you were trying to figure out what was going on here, or?
Well, I wouldn't say inspiration, but I read Swedenborg a lot years ago, and he was, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was kind of in this dual state most of his life, from like his late 50s on, and he was like what he referred to as angels, which are more or less the dead, and he would enter these states where he would more or less speak with spirits and blah blah blah. But he mentions a lot of things about language there and just quality of thought and memory and stuff like that. And I hadn't read Swedenborg in a while, but after with Salvia, a lot of it reminded me of things that he had said about these different states of awareness in what he would call like either heaven or the world of the spirits or that type of thing. And the thing is, he's like normally that stuff would really strike me as nonsense, like this Swedenborg type stuff. But he was so articulate and so this is really interesting character, and just he speaks about things a lot of you just don't hear very often. Really deep, rich philosophical things about the union of truth and goodness, and stuff like that. It's just very interesting, and he really analyzes quite a few things. But anyway, that being said, it was reminiscent of Swedenborg and you wouldn't think that because this is kind of very, if anything, it's like kind of a shamanic type of state. Again, that I wasn't expecting, but that's the last thing you would think of with Swedenborg. But there were actually a lot of similarities that kind of surprised me.
What kind of were you expecting when you first started to try it out?
I was expecting like an LSD type thing. Say when I used to do LSD years ago, I would do it with a friend of mine, and we would we'd have the lights on, and we would have like kind of like get immersed in art and like Egyptian and Tibetan art, maybe some like Persian architecture, that kind of thing. Just really aesthetic. These kind of multi-layered, really rich, emotional representations of God knows what. And I was kind of expecting that with Salvia again. Only I kind of had the idea just from reading the way the Mazateks would do Salvia that they would only do it in the dark and that type of thing. So that's what I did when I did it, and just darkness and solitude, and so you don't. I thought it would kind of be like LSD, but it was quite different. It did, just really cacophonous. Pretty first couple of times were pretty rugged. Just just nothing made sense. And I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting, like this aesthetic, state where things tend to make more sense. Things can connect rather than disconnect. And so it kind of, knocked me off guard there. And I did it a couple of times. And I really thought, like, this is, a waste of time. I'm not going to, just waste too much time with this. It's horrible. And the thing that I didn't like is like I would smoke, and within a few seconds you start like losing your mind, and you can't think, and you just have these like cacophonous visions of like all this. I think I used the phrase nauseatingly bizarre. Yeah, and that's how it felt. It was like, what is this? It's not what I was expecting. And so, I figured, well, maybe I'll try it, try one more time, maybe twice. But I thought this is, it's not worth the trouble. And so I tried it again, a week or so later, and it was the same kind of thing, but there was something a little different about it. It was kind of a continuation of the time before, and that's what kind of struck me as odd, that there was like some kind of connection, and that there was just something weird about it that I hadn't, I didn't get the first couple of times I did it. Just something that was somehow interesting about it, and then I think that's what started. There was a continuity there that was a little different that I wasn't expecting, and also it didn't seem as other. Now that I knew that you go in and you go nuts for a while, you just lose your mind. I figured, okay, well, I can, I know, I'll be back in 5 minutes, so I can, I can afford that, and so that's when I started doing it, and then just kind of progressed from there, and it became less frightening, and then the things like learning that I was like my thought had stopped, that kind of thing, started happening after a while, and then it really started getting interesting. And then kind of these kind of interpersonal things with, there would be like people there, and just, it was like kind of fleeting at first, and then it just became more and more, I don't like to use the word real, but more and more demanding. And then there's, it just kind of took off from there.
And speaking of people, one of the the whole book is interesting, but a particularly interesting part I felt was when a few of those people started to be consistent. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there was a major thing for me. I didn't realize it at the time, but I would smoke, and I would kind of just have these little vignettes, these little visions, and this one time I smoked, and there was an older woman, an older black woman, maybe Jamaican or Haitian. It's hard to tell. And she was doing something with her hand, some kind of like it almost looked like that string game. I forget what you call it, where you have these string through your fingers and knots and stuff.
Oh, right.
But she was doing something like that with her hands, and she just said, "You're accepted." Very no big deal. Just kind of, and that was the whole thing. And I came out of it, and I thought, well, it's stupid. What does this mean? And I didn't think anything of it. And I mean, it was interesting seeing the woman and doing the stuff with her hands, but as far as the being accepted, I didn't really get. I didn't know what that meant. And but then the next time I smoked salvia, like about a week or two later, all of a sudden there was something different about it. It was just, it had settled. It had. It's hard to describe, but it was a settled state, and it was the same after that. Every time I would smoke after that, I would go back to the same. Like, it didn't have that cacophonous rush of nonsense anymore. Now there was just something solid in it, and I would just go back to that one state all the time, and so that was pretty major. And then as kind of at the same time, there were, like I would see people, just sort of peripherally, and maybe hear, like little phrases or that kind of thing, or some kind of communication happening. But what would happen now? I mean, this sounds nuts. I mean, it sounds so ridiculous, but yet this is what happens. And but these people these like things would become more and more sort of real and solidified and personal. And like I think I mentioned in the book, almost changed from the people being in the third person to being in the second person, where it just became more direct and more just using the word personal, but I can't think of any other way to say it. And then it was like I would go with them, and they would come and they would kind of greet me. They would try, more in effect, kind of take me with them, and that's what would happen. That's what it became after a while. It became a scenario where I would smoke, and they'd be, and I would kind of go with them. There would be some kind of scenario where we'd interact, and there would be like a mutual acknowledgement of each other's existence. And this was like out of the blue. Like this, I had not been, and it was kind of disorienting, because I wasn't aware of anything like this. I wasn't expecting it. And, where do you look this up? There's nowhere to turn, and that was disorienting. And that was one of the reasons why I thought of writing the book, because I thought somebody else is going to be in this position. And it might just, it would be a kind of a reality check for them. It's, that this stuff does happen, and who knows where it is, but anyway, that's what kept happening, and that's what happens now. It's just like very, it's like it's very personal. There's a group of beings who kind of greet me, and they'll say things, or there'll be little vignettes or some like a little image or something that will occur, and that's like almost like the point of the thing, for that particular instance. And so that's where it stands today. There's like a threshold of kind of joining them. And that's always been there, and it's always, like someday I'm gonna join them for good, but you don't know if you're gonna come back, so you have to be willing to accept that,
right?
Because like Kathleen Harrison talks about the Mazateks, I guess, they're kind of scared of Salvia because sometimes people don't come back. Now, I can't imagine that happening in a normal world here. You don't hear of it, people smoking and just not coming back or whatever. But when you're over there, it's a whole different ballgame, because you're not. This world doesn't have it's like this world is gone. This world is not here anymore, and over there, it has its own reality, and it's more real almost. I would say more real, period, because it's more internal. There's not as the whole state without thought is superior. I think we're just so used to thought as having this kind of honored position in our life, but there's a whole other realm that's different. And but anyway, there is always this option to go with them, and that's always kind of a little daunting. Doesn't mean that it's going to be permanent, but you never know. And like I said, someday I will go with them. I don't know when, sooner or later, but not this week. I'm not ready to, really put all my chips in that one, on that one.
Well, and especially, I mean, you say this in the book, but would you mind telling the audience where exactly they said that you were?
They don't say anything like that. They'll say, actually, they have said kind of again, it's that language thing. It's kind of the land or the realm of the dead, which is, and it's like an understood thing. Like, I mean, it sounds absurd, but, and again, this is like, when I started getting this stuff, it's like, where's this coming from? This is absurd, but that's what I would always get, and that's what I get to this day. And it's not so much that it's like, kind of this, spooky land of the dead, or the crossing over, the relatives, looking down, that kind of thing. It's just something. It's a realm that's outside of life, and and it's like they've used the word dead, so don't blame me. I mean, that's what I always get, and it's like fair. I would say pretty much every time I smoke salvia, it's like, again, it's like a mutual acknowledgement when I'm there, that this is where it is. It's almost like there's and it's not like a specific, the dead, like, Uncle Bob, but it's like sort of this like ocean of ancient souls or something. It's like this like very general state of maybe like human awareness or some kind of something that is not in this ordinary life. And so it's like has something to do with death. I don't, again, it's very hard to put into words, but this is consistently what is presented to me when I'm there. And like I think I mentioned in the book, like, like say, naturally it enters your mind to like contact, someone who's died or something. You think that, you're going to be entering this realm of the dead, but at the same time, it's like the same thing happens. You left your thoughts at the door, and so you go in and you don't like remember things. You don't remember people. You don't have this thought of, oh, this is what I'm going to be doing today. I'm going to be looking for so and so.
Right.
So you've left everything behind. So you just go in and you're just all new, and you're just kind of eyes and ears, and that's all.
Which makes me wonder about the Mazatec. I mean, if they use it for, I don't know if they use it for healing. I know in your book you mentioned it for divination, but it seems from what you said it would be really, really hard to go in there with an intention and then remember what the heck that was.
Yeah, right. That's what I would always come up against. Now with the Mazatecs, they would chew the leaves, so it would almost be more like the tincture. So it might be a milder, like not as intense as smoking. I think with smoking, that's when you really, that's when the gate shows up, when you cross the gate and then you're in this thoughtless realm. Now with the Mazatecs, it might be more like a twilight state for them, because I from what I understand, they don't smoke it. They think smoking it is almost sacrilegious or that type of thing.
Okay.
So, and I've never read of them smoking it. All the accounts from the anthropologists who've gone there, it's always just chewed, and so they might not have the intensity that the smoking would give. But it's probably like a whole different state for them. They have the cultural thing around it, and so I really don't know. Like maybe they could use it for divination. It wouldn't surprise me if I mean, I would imagine salvia is probably pretty changeable in different things. But for myself, I just don't. I wind up just leaving everything at the door. Like I said, it's a more complete break for me. And I would imagine for most people who smoke too, it's that intensity that's kind of paramount, operative, for the state.
And speaking of that intensity, I know that a few people have sort of gone into kind of a trance state and lost control of your body, and even your some of the characters that you met said that perhaps you should have a sitter. Is that right?
Yeah. I didn't want to, because I always thought of it as like this kind of solitary thing, and I have a little workshop, and I would go over there and maybe start a fire in the winter or in the summer, just hang out and kind of work myself up, and then smoke, just kind of prepare. And then the thing with the sitter, I didn't get, and I was resistant to it. And but as I get, consistently, again, it's another consistent thing that I get quite often. Is like, you shouldn't die alone, and they would refer to kind of going there as like those who are willing to die to be here, or something like that. And then they'll say, well, you shouldn't die. It's good the sitter's there. You don't want to die alone. Or so it's always like connected as if I'm dying when I go there. And I kind of balked at the because I don't, I like to do it on my own, and but I would, acquiesce sometimes and have a sitter. But I occasionally, if I'm just smoking leaf, I'll just do it on my own. Although I have kind of gotten a few indications that I should have a sitter, even though I'm just smoking leaf. But I kind of split half and half.
And another thing is that that I thought was sorry, I'm just using the word interesting over and over again. I need to, go to a thesaurus or something, but was it kind of like, they seemed surprised that you didn't necessarily have a tribal affiliation. You were just there on your own.
Yeah. Again, that was another thing that I wasn't expecting, was this whole tribal deal. I always thought of, like say, visionary plants like LSD or whatever is sort of, like kind of, cerebral in one sense and emotive, but kind of like transcending ordinary things, kind of getting on this sort of toward enlightenment or that kind of way of looking at things. But with this, it was all of a sudden now there's this whole like kind of tribal structure where I would be kind of, it would be demonstrated to me how it would work, and that almost like the function of somebody who would join them, kind of died to join them. Their function would be with a tribe or a group of people, but basically a tribe, and their function would be to kind of be a link to this other realm for that group of people. And again, I wasn't expecting this. It really is not the kind of thing I would have, looked for, but, there were times when, this one particular time where I was there, and it was kind of like a gathering of people who were representing their either familial group, and I was there, and on my own, I was just no group there, and but I was kind of like sort of not shunned, but kind of pushed aside as like not doing what I was supposed to do because I wasn't part of this familial network of whatever people who would relinquish something to be there for their tribe. And again, the thing that's interesting is that like this was all presented to me. So it wasn't like I went in thinking I wonder how tribes would do. There's nothing like that. It wasn't like I was this was even in my mind. And that's what struck me as interesting. It just came from this kind of organic process, and it's just like very different. And that's it demanded to be noticed, I guess, and to be acknowledged. And so and when I wrote the book, I tried to put down everything like that somebody who might smoke salvia might encounter. Just have a kind of a well-rounded thing. Now, I don't know if other people get this. I mean, I'm sure some people do, and that's I'd like to hear their stuff too. I'd like to because it seems like that's where salvia leads, and it seems like there are a lot of people who have like very similar things to what I experienced, and so there seems to be some kind of universality to it.
Well,
it's very interesting, and I'd like to hear accounts of other people's experiences, like along similar lines. Maybe they'll write some books or something.
I love this stuff. I hope we get as many books as we can.
Yeah, because there's not many books on salvia, and it'd be nice if people wrote more. Just got some stuff out there. Of course, the forums or fora, they can be kind of let down because there's basically anybody who smokes anything and has any experience goes on for 5 pages about things, and lots of times it just seems like that cacophonous nonsense. And then, or if somebody has something that's really interesting, they put down their experience. It winds up getting lost like 2 days later. You can't find it. So it would be good if there was something more, like more books out there.
Well, and another really good point about your book that I really appreciate is that it has been over such a long period of time, and so this seems to be the common themes that you've taken out versus, I don't know, going on Arrowhead or something and seeing one particular amazing event that someone had. You, by contrast, have years worth of experiences that you're kind of compiling together, and I think that that's really valuable to the community, actually. So thank you for that. So.
Yeah,
sorry.
Like what I wanted to do was kind of get the threads of what, kind of like what's different about salvia. What does it really do, rather than, and I would have to use my notes just to kind of illustrate something, or else, it would be hard to demonstrate that type of, like say the faultless awareness or the dream language, but it seems like there are certain things with salvia that certain aspects of it that nothing else has that I've encountered anyway.
Do you feel I thought when I was reading your account and there was kind of the group of Mexicans that were there, mm-hmm. Did you kind of, looking back on that, do you feel that they were, I don't know, doing this at the same time as you and just happened to end up in the same space, other people who had chosen to die?
I know. It's funny. These are the kind of things that kind of get you. You wonder, and I basically I don't know, and I as much as it's a temptation to speculate. I don't know. Nothing would surprise me with Salvia, but I try not to read into it too much, because it seems like that. I mean, it seems like that could be a trap to try to, make sense out of stuff and say, well, maybe this is what was really going on. I prefer not to do that, not to speculate. And it's very mysterious stuff out there, and I find it's best to just let it be and not try to. I mean, there's always possibilities, and you always want to be open to those possibilities. But I'd rather have kind of proof for myself before I, sort of jump to conclusions about things.
Right. Has it had any effect on your regular dreaming?
No. I mean, I've had there's been a few times when I've had dreams that were kind of salviaic, but just I would say no, not in any way that I would really notice.
Do you meditate at all, or?
I used to years ago, but I don't anymore. And the way I see it now, I'm not saying this is true or not, but the way I see it right now is that, say, with meditation, well, first of all, I don't know how far one could get with meditation, aside from accounts of what people say. But with meditation, you kind of have an agenda. You kind of, say if you're watching your breath, you're always kind of start having thoughts, come back to the breath, come back to the breath. So you're doing something. You're working to achieve a goal, even though supposedly you're not. But with Salvia, like, it's out of your control. It's out of your hands. You're at the mercy of whatever, presents itself to you. Whereas with meditation, you're kind of, first of all, you're not gonna see what you see on Salvia.
Right.
Or, you're not gonna experience the intensity. I mean, I can't picture that. I mean, people would be hopping up pretty fast. They're not going to be sitting there and undergoing this stuff. But with Salvia, you're kind of stuck there. So you're relinquishing everything. You have no agenda. You have no control. And you're going to experience a lot of stuff. And that's the way I see it, describe it to myself. And, I meditated for a couple of years, went to, Vipassana, the Vipassana retreat and everything. But I never got, anything like really, really solid out of it, compared to Salvia. But also, even like, say, with meditation, you have, like, there's goals like kind of loving kindness, and which is well and good. But those are concepts. That's ordinary thinking, and you go in and that's nice. But you're looking for peace. You're looking for loving kindness. You're looking for compassion, and those are pretty much, they're pretty ordinary concepts. They're thoughts, and they're things that, if I say, loving kindness, you know what I mean. You know what I'm talking about, or compassion. Whereas with Salvia, the thoughts are gone. There's no concepts. It's a lot more. It's out of your control, and there's no agenda. Outside of getting home safe. That's it. And that's what I like. I like, I want to be able to Salvia changes you. It changes the way you perceive, it changes the way you see yourself. It changes the way you see the world. And I like that. There's no kind of, I don't know, self-deception or something with it. Like you kind of, it's a kind of a life and death intensity, which, is, pretty honest, I think. When you're in that state, you're not, you're just there, and you have to just deal with it. And anyway, I like that. I like that intensity and honesty about it.
What have your friends and family, have they had any opinion or insight into your experiences, or have you kind of shied away from telling them? Or
I don't really talk about it too much. My wife, she smoked Salvia a couple of times and doesn't like it. It's not, she gets the kind of cacophonous stuff, and, but she respects she knows that I'm not bullshitting with this. And so she's really interested in everything, but she's just, for her, she hasn't, gotten anything yet. And friends, some friends have done it and it kind of scared them. And then other friends just don't want anything to do with it. But, I don't push it. It's not like the kind of thing I'm going to bring up at Thanksgiving, So it's most people, it's kind of a specific location, I think. A lot of people just don't care about stuff. And they probably some people think I'm nuts or, whatever, but, or they're making it up or something, who knows. But that's all right, because, there's enough people out there, like yourself, know these things are interesting.
I should have asked this earlier, but all of a sudden I saw my notes and I was like, oh man, I gotta ask this one. What connections or what's your current thought on why they may need a connection to this place?
Again, I have no idea. I've gotten that a couple of times. I think I mentioned in the book, like it would seem to me that there would be no connection, because that's such a different realm. I would tend to think that it was totally almost diametrically opposite to this, and that there'd be no connection. But I've gotten that sense between the tribal stuff and just sometimes when I'm going right in to the trance, there'll be a little kind of, somebody will say something kind of almost humorous a lot of times, and that leads me to believe that it's both worlds are merging at that one little spot. But I really don't know what the connection is, and I wouldn't want to stress that there's a connection, like they're, looking down or, that kind of thing, because we're so kind of, that stuff has been spoon-fed and shoved down our throats forever about the looking down and the judging and blah, blah, blah. So that's I tend to think of it as, in my mind, I tend to think of it as totally separate. But if there's a connection, then I'm not going to turn my back on that. But there has been like little indications, like the one thing, there was there were some Mexican guys, and they were I guess the ones who had died bravely or something like that. Now, normally I wouldn't think that would even matter in that realm, and that took me by surprise, because there was almost like there was a value being placed on a brave death. So again, the jury's out. I have no idea whether there's a real connection, or much of a connection, or there might be more than I'm aware of that might tend to surface in the future. But just based on what I've seen so far, I would tend to think that there's very little connection. But who knows?
I know that for the most part you have seen people, but you do also mention kind of like almost like bee creatures and sort of like mantis-like things. Any other kind of stuff like that you that wasn't included in the book that you'd like to share? Or?
Not really. Those were pretty singular things. I think with that, it was kind of like talking about the body over there. It was almost like I had a different type of body than a human body. This was the experience. I'm not making any pronouncements here. But I'm just saying that was the experience. It was like I was experiencing an almost insect-like body, and with emotions on a really I don't want to use the word primitive, but like emotions on a real basis, only with a different body. And I think that was that there was a level of experiencing, even with that body, just totally different. And but I think that it was equally as valid. I think that's what I came away with, was that experience was equally as valid to what we think of as our we tend to think of ourselves as like superior or something, but I don't like to use it's not like there's a lesson in these things, but it was almost like a little sort of teaching experience or learning experience, that there are realms of experience that we have no clue about, and that they're not just human, and that there's possibilities that are immense and overwhelming that we have no clue about, and that these things do have possibilities. And that's all I could honestly take away from that. But that was pretty dramatic, and it's like that. It kind of stays with you. It's a memory, but it kind of changes you. Or it did me anyway, to have experienced that. It's not like I think of it every day, but it's I see things differently now because of that, which is a good thing. I think that's what I like about Salvia. It changes you. It's like it's experiential. That's the whole deal. It's not like you thought of this and you figure it out. It's not like that. It's not like a mental thing. This is just life and death experience, and you're right there, and you come away with it, and it's like inside you, it's in your core after experiencing some of these things.
Well, Instigator One, do you have any questions, man?
I had one question for you. I was wondering, what do you think are the benefits and possibly things that people should be aware of when they take salvia in order to prepare themselves and make sure that they don't have a bad experience, kind of?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate because you hear like some really sad stories about people, usually young people who done salvia, and there was one young kid who killed himself. Uh, he committed suicide, and he was like, I think 16 or something. But he said, he'd smoked salvia, and he saw that life had no meaning anymore. Therefore, and that should not happen. Uh, uh, Kids should not go near salvia. There's another young guy in Manhattan somewhere who smoked salvia and jumped off a balcony. And it was, his family was there, his sisters. Horrible story. And that, again, that should not happen. I think people are doing like really heavy doses, like 20, 40, 60 X. And, that, I mean, if say somebody who's done salvia, excuse me, and worked their way up, started with leaf, maybe went to 5X, maybe didn't even feel 5X that much and went to 10X, and then maybe wanted to try 20X, that's different. Somebody who kind of knows what they're doing and, has their sea legs about it. But, so many times like I've gone to sites or, looking on the various fora and stuff, and, people say, I've never smoked salvia before, so I guess I'm going to, take your advice and start with 40X. And, it just seems like that's going to be horrible. It's going to, it's just going to be awful. And like say somebody like Daniel Siebert, his site, sagewisdom.org, you go on there. I mean, he does everything he can to make sure that people, do salvia responsibly, that they educate themselves about it. That, they start off gradually. Like I don't think he might sell like, little tiny things of 10X, but everything is, he either sells like leaf, or, like 5 or 6X, something like that. Like that's responsible. And, I would, I just feel bad for, these people. And it's not like they're going to get much out of it, I don't think, doing these ridiculously high. It's like kind of this, the beer bong mentality or something, It's just, that's not how it works. It's a qualitative thing, not a quantitative thing. And, I feel bad that, you see that, you come on sites, some sites, and the least potent they sell are like 20X, something like that, for beginners, and I think that's going to do a lot of harm. But I think for the most part, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if salvia has kind of seen its heyday in the past, because I think a lot of people have tried it and didn't like it, and they're not going to go back to doing it, which might actually be a good thing, because the less people that do it, the less you're going to hear about it on Oprah or Dr. Phil or something,
Mm-hmm.
and that that it might be legal for longer. But I think the more people do these outrageously high doses, it doesn't seem it's going to do anyone any good. And it's not like they're going to, I don't think, see anything really worthwhile. It's too fast. But I mean, that's just my feeling on it. I just, it's a shame to see when kids die because of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessary, but people are going to do what they're going to do. Not much you can do about it.
What would you say the benefits are, and why you continue to use it?
I mean, for me, it's the way it helps me perceive myself and the world, and the relation of myself to the world, my perceptions. It kind of knocked out of the box a lot of misconceptions that that we all have. You grow up with, your definition of the real world, and it's one thing to try to think your way out of it, but that doesn't really work. It's not like you could, sort of philosophically decide that your senses are all like extremely limited, and that the world is just, you're not directly perceiving the world, you're just perceiving your senses, and you can figure all that stuff out philosophically, but then what do you do? It's not like doesn't change anything. Whereas with an experience like Salvia, it goes right to your core. There's no guesswork. There's no head scratching. This is just the way it is, and it knocks a lot of stuff. I mean, for me, it knocked a lot of stuff out of the box as far as the way you perceive the world. It's just you're just not going to base too many decisions on perceptual. I mean, of course, you're still going to put cream in your coffee. You're still in the real world, but you know that there's something else out there. Once you know that this world can fade in an instant, and really believe that. I'm not talking about just you read it somewhere and it sounds good, or you thought figured it out or something. But when you really believe and have experienced that everything that you hold dear, everything in your world can just evaporate in a matter of moments once your thought stops, I mean, that's going to change it. And that's, I think, if that's what you want, if you want to like really kind of look for that, that avenue of assessment of reality, then Salvia is good for that. I'd prefer Salvia to pretty much anything else I've ever done as far as that, because this is the only thing that really, really does that. So I would say that's the benefit of Salvia. It's a very specific benefit. It's like it can be used for kind of one thing, and that's to really analyze your perceptions and your relation to what you would tend to call yourself and the world at large. And I think for that, it can't be beat, but it, I see that as a benefit.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. You mentioned some other things that you've done before. You said LSD, but what else have you tried? If you don't mind telling us.
Well, mostly just the standard issue hallucinogens, peyote and mushrooms. I never did ayahuasca. Just never had the opportunity. And again, like peyote and mushrooms, it's not like they've been, freely available, throughout the years.
Right.
And even now, I mean, I wouldn't do them now, even though if they were made legal or whatever. I think I just prefer I prefer Salvia to anything. And this is the fact that it's legal where I'm living, and it's has all the benefits and none of the drawbacks.
Right.
Like excuse me, like LSD. When I was younger, I mean, you'd have to prepare. It takes like 8 hours. You wind up staying up all night, and the next day. So it's like this kind of 2 or 3 day production. Whereas with Salvia, it takes 10 minutes of So it's it's good that very efficient that way. And then the thing is, it's for me, I've just gotten a lot more out of it than anything else. So you hear good things about ayahuasca and stuff. I have no idea. I've never done it.
Okay. Thanks.
So, what is in the future? Do you think in another few years you might continue with your insights on salvia, or do you feel you have another book in you? Or I'm certainly looking forward to Siebert's salvia book. I know that he's talked about it a few times. I haven't heard any updates on that.
Yeah, that's been in the works for quite a while. It's probably going to be pretty good. As far as myself, I mean, I don't really see another salvia book unless something really happens, and that I would feel would really need to be kind of counted. Because I don't want to just do it, experiences, blah blah blah. I mean, I'm still keeping notes and I'm keeping track of them, but I don't see another book. I think. And you never know, but at this point, I don't think I'm not a writer anyway. This was just something I felt like I just wanted to do. So I don't really see another book, but you never know. I mean, maybe something will happen and kind of force my hand, but otherwise, I think I just see what other people have to say about what their experiences are.
Cool. Well, James, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for the invitation. It was very, very enjoyable. Nice time.
Yeah, thanks, James.
Okay, thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode of Cosmic Echo and would like to learn more or listen to additional episodes, you can visit our website at tailors.com/CE podcast, and there you can click on additional links. You can additionally support our podcast through our Patreon page, which is located at the same location. We look forward to bringing you additional episodes in the near future, and until then, happy dreaming.